Good day. Today, I am tasked to discuss concepts about cost volume profit analysis or the profit planning analysis. But before we proceed to the main course of this PowerPoint presentation, let me first discuss to you the topic outline in order for you to know the contents of today's discussion. The topic outline for today's discussion includes number one, the concept of CVP analysis. Okay, so we will discuss briefly the concept of CVP analysis, and after that, we will discuss the break-even point concepts. Then, after mai-discuss yung mga concepts on break-even point, we will proceed to how to compute the break-even point. No? And then we will also tackle the effects of changes in SP, VC, and FC. SP stands for selling price, VC stands for variable cost, then FC stands for fixed cost. And then we will also tackle about margin of safety concepts. And then we will also tackle about break-even point. How are we going to achieve the break-even point assuming that you are provided with a target income? Okay, so i-explain ko po yan. And then, paano naman po natin i-compute yung break-even point? Assuming that a particular company has a single amount of total fixed cost, and that single amount of total fixed cost is being shared by multiple products. So, paano po natin kukumputin yung break-even point? Okay? And then, I will give you illustrative examples, particularly yung mga topics na kailangan natin pagtuunan ng pansin. And then, a short summary about this PowerPoint presentation. Okay? So, let us begin with the concept of the cost volume profit analysis. Cost volume profit analysis, okay, it is a systematic examination. Systematic kasi mayroon po tayong proseso na sinusunod on how are we going to examine. Ano po ang i-examine natin? That is the relationship among the selling price that we determine, the amount of sales that we achieve, the number of units produced, and then the cost and expenses related to the production of the said product, not only related to the production, but also to other costs that that nawala namang significance on the production, kagaya ng supervisor's salary, yung salary ng mga security guard, okay? Kasama rin po yung mga administrative costs. And then and the relationship of those items on determining the profit. The cost volume profit analysis can be used in okay, because of cost volume profit analysis, most of the companies can able to determine the selling price, okay, the profitable selling price. Kasi nakikita naman nila pag ganito kalaki yung volume lang, ganito lang karami ng production ang meron tayo, at ganito kalaki ang expense, paano po natin ma-achieve yung target income natin? Kaya nakikita nila kung magkano ang dapat isingil, okay, to the consumers. Pangalawa, it can be used in selecting the mix of products to sell. Okay, kasi minsan nga in businesses, a total fixed cost, no, can be used on different or multiple products. Tanong mo ngayon, kasi ginagamit itong total fixed cost on multiple products, paano po natin masasabi na ito sa product na ganito, mas marami kaysa sa product na isa para ma-achieve yung break-even or yung kitang gusto nating ma-achieve. So, the cost volume profit analysis technique will give us an answer for that. So, later on, I will discuss that. Pangatlo, choosing among marketing strategies. Because we can able to determine our quota, the number of volume to be sold, okay? We can able to determine what marketing strategy para ma-achieve natin yung planong iyon. For example, you want to achieve around 10,000 number of units na dapat maibenta in a particular area. Ano po bang marketing strategy ang dapat natin gawin para ma-achieve yon? Okay? And then, pang-apat, we can able to analyze the effects of the changes in cost on profits. So, maiintindihan din po natin on cost volume profit analysis. Okay? Ano po ba epekto ng pagbabago ng cost sa profit natin? Will it be a favorable effect or unfavorable effect? Those are most common usage of CVP analysis. Okay? Next in my discussion is about the break-even point. Okay? Alam naman po natin what is break-even. Kadalasan yung iba sasabihin break-even, yun po yung sinasabi na zero. Quits lang. Wala pong kita, wala naman pong kalugian. Okay? Ibig sabihin nun na yung revenue and mga expenses na na-incurred natin throughout the year nagkapareho. Okay? In a standard base presentation of FS, that is the gross income is equal to the operating expenses. But because we are discussing about CVP analysis and profit planning and the method, the cost of accounting method na ginagamit natin on CVP analysis is variable costing system. Okay? Yung tinatawag na break-even point is the contribution margin tend to be equal to the fixed cost. Okay? Ano po yung contribution margin na sinasabi ko? Okay? If you are going to recall on the variable costing system, the contribution margin is equal to sales minus variable cost. Or it is the selling price per unit less variable cost per unit. That is the contribution margin. If the total contribution margin, okay, in pesos, not in per unit, in pesos equals to the fixed cost, ibig sabihin po nun, we are at break-even. Okay? So, that is break-even point. Ibig sabihin, we achieve the break-even point if the contribution margin na na-compute po natin equals to the fixed cost, assuming that we are using the variable costing system. Okay? Ngayon, sabi ko nga kanina, because this is CVP analysis and we are trying to determine at what level po tayo dapat makadetermine na hindi po tayo lugi at hindi naman po tayo kumikita. Okay? So, we will now discuss how are we going to determine the level wherein we can say that we are at break-even. Okay? Bakit importante po natin malaman that this level is at break-even? Kasi ibig sabihin, we cannot produce less than the break-even point. Kasi if we produce less than the break-even point, wag na lang natin sabing produce. If we sell goods less than the break-even point, malulugi po tayo. Okay? So, yun po yung purpose ng determining the break-even point. Our objective is to determine the break-even point and to sell goods not less than, okay, the break-even point. Kailangan po natin ma-achieve that we sell goods at break-even or above the break-even. Yun po yung purpose ng CVP analysis. Okay? So, paano po natin kukumputin yung break-even point? The computation of break-even point can be in two different manners. Depende po yun. Bakit two different manners? Kasi it will depend kung ano po ba ang gusto nating computin. In units ba na break-even point or in peso sales? Generally, the computation of break-even is simply dividing total fixed cost to the contribution margin. That is the general rule. But if we're going to compute it in units and in peso sales, same pa rin, kaso meron lang konting pagkakaiba. Kasi once we compute the break-even point in units, the total fixed cost must be divided to the contribution margin per unit. Okay? Ibig sabihin, sa bawat fixed cost, okay, ito yung contribution margin per unit. Pag i-divide natin yun, magko-compute natin na ito yung total number of units para ma-achieve yung contribution margin natin na equal to the fixed cost. Okay? Kaya nga, contribution margin per unit ang denominator natin. But if we are going to compute the peso sales, because we want it to squeeze papunta sa sales, remember, sales is at 100%. If the contribution margin ratio is at 20%, we need to expect that the total fixed cost is at 20% as well. Para at least, pag i-divide po natin, i-squeeze natin siya, i-work back natin siya sa pataas, ibig sabihin, the contribution margin and the fixed cost will have the same ratio. Okay? So, lalabas, break-even po yun. So, that's why, in computing the peso sales, that is total fixed cost over the contribution margin ratio. Well, anyways, we will understand mamaya if I provide illustrative examples. Okay? Ngayon naman, let us discuss about the possible effects if any item in the break-even point analysis have changed. Ibig sabihin po nun, if one item on the break-even point analysis na ginagawa natin, merong nagbago. For example, the selling price ng per unit, no, nagbago, and then the variable cost per unit remain unchanged. The total fixed cost remain unchanged. What would be the effect on the break-even point? Okay, in units and in sales. How about naman po, sir? If the selling price remain unchanged but the variable cost per unit nagbago, and then the total fixed cost hindi nagbago, ano po ba effect nito sa break-even point in units and in sales? What if naman, kung the selling price and the variable cost per unit nagbago at the same level, ano po ba effect nito sa break-even point? Well, on the table provided, meron pong ito yung nangyari, okay? Yung kabila, ito yung effect. Okay? For example, okay? If there is an increase in selling price per unit and the other items did not change, okay, what would be its effect on the break-even point? Sabi, it will decrease in peso sales and unit sales. Bakit nga? Take note, if madagdagan po yung selling price natin at hindi nagbago yung variable cost per unit at hindi nagbago ang total fixed cost, ano po ba effect ng increase ng selling price sa contribution margin? Well, madadagdagan po yung contribution margin. So, pag madagdagan yung contribution margin, the contribution margin per unit will increase and the contribution margin ratio will increase as well. Okay? No? So, ano po ba effect nito? Okay? Tataas yung contribution margin per unit pero bababa yung ratio. Okay? So, ano posibleng effect nito? The effect will be, kasi bababa yung denominator natin. Okay? Bababa ang peso sales at unit sales. Okay? How about if the variable cost per unit? If there's a decrease in variable cost per unit, bababa. Ganun pa rin yung selling price. So, ibig sabihin, tataas yung variable cost per unit. Okay? So, pag ganun, effect, there will be a decrease in peso sales and unit sales. Okay? Kasi, tumaas nga yung contribution margin unit natin. Pag tumaas yun, mataas yung denominator natin, take note in the principle of mathematics, if the denominator keep on increasing, the quotient will keep on decreasing. Okay? No? Pag tumataas yung divisor ba tawag doon? Ibig sabihin, marami ang naghahati-hati, lumiliit ang nahati-hatian. Okay? So, kaya nga, bumababa ang peso sales at bumababa ang unit sales. How about if there's an increase in selling price and variable cost per unit at the same level? Ano po ba ibig sabihin nito? Ibig sabihin, if the selling price increases by 10% and the variable cost per unit increases by 10% as well, ano po ba effect nito sa contribution margin? Well, ang effect nito sa contribution margin tataas. Contribution margin per unit tataas. Pero, pag i-divide mo yung contribution margin per unit to the new selling price, the contribution margin ratio remain the same. Ayun, merong pagkakaiba ha. The contribution margin ratio remain the same kahit tumaas yung selling price at variable cost per unit at the same level. The contribution margin ratio remain the same. Pero, the contribution margin unit increases. If the contribution margin ratio remain the same, we can conclude now that the break-even point in peso sales, will remain unchanged. But the break-even point in unit will decrease. Kasi tumaas yung contribution margin per unit. Hindi naman nagbago yung contribution margin ratio. Ganun rin po yung effect on decrease in selling price per unit and variable cost per unit at the same level. Okay? The peso sales will remain the same kasi the contribution margin ratio will remain unchanged. Pero, yung unit sales natin will increase. Kasi bababa yung per unit ng contribution margin, bababa ang magiging denominator natin sa computation of the break-even point. So, aangat ang quotient. Ibig sabihin, tataas ang number of units na dapat i-produce para ma-achieve ang break-even point. Okay? So, we can now conclude if the contribution margin ratio remain unchanged, if the increase and decrease, okay, the selling price and the variable cost per unit at the same level, effect nito, the peso sales remain the same. Pero, the break-even point in units, it will depend. If increase, magiging decrease yung units. Pero kung decrease, mag-i-increase ang units. Pero as to peso sales, pareho pa rin. How about an increase in fixed cost and decrease in fixed cost? Meron po silang direct relationship. If there's an increase in fixed cost and the contribution margin remain unchanged, aangat po ang peso sales. The decrease in fixed cost, bababa na, assuming that the contribution margin remain unchanged, the decrease in peso sales and unit sales remain bababa naman siya. Okay? So, hopefully naklaro ko po yung possible effects if any item of the break-even point analysis have changed. Importante po to na malaman po natin ano po ba ang mga epekto if there is an increase on a particular item of any item in any no of any item in the break-even point analysis. Kasi kadalasan lumalabas po to sa board exam. Okay? Importante po natin malaman at maintindihan. At take note, if we're going to recall, no, one of the uses, of the CBP analysis is to determine and analyze the effect of the cost, okay, of change, analyze the effect of the changes in the cost to the profit. Okay? Yan. Kaya, sinama ko na rin po ito. Okay? Next, let's talk about margin of safety. The margin of safety is the level of real sales above the break-even point and is necessarily calculated to avoid losses. The level by which a company's sales could decrease before the company will become unprofitable. Okay? So, sa madalit sabi, the margin of safety, no? That is the amount wherein we can say na pwede tayong gumalaw sa level na yan, pwedeng bumaba at that, pwedeng, for example, no, 1 million, that is the actual sales. And then the break-even point is 900,000, assuming. So the margin of safety is 100,000. So, ibig sabihin po nun, pwede tayong gumalaw from 1 to 100,000. 1 peso to 100,000. Okay? Pag magbaba ng 1 yan, okay? Maglampas, pag bumaba ng 100,000, sabihin natin, maging negative na yan. No? Maging negative na, hindi positive 100,000. Ibig sabihin po nun, there is a possibility that the company will incur losses. Okay? That is important, no? Why do we need to understand margin of safety? Why do we need to determine the margin of safety? Because at this value, ibig sabihin, dito tayo safe na meron po tayo pang income na makukuha. Okay? So, how are we going to compute the margin of safety in units? The margin of safety in units is simply calculating the sales in units minus the sales in break-even point units. Kasi units to units. The margin of safety in peso sales, that is sales in pesos, minus the sales in break-even points peso sales. Okay? Margin of safety ratio, ito importante ito, no? The margin of safety ratio in peso sales, okay, no? That is sales minus peso, sales in peso minus sales in break-even point in peso over the current sales. Okay? So, that's the ratio. Okay? Ano po ba effect? If there is an increase in sales, okay, effect nito, tataas po yung margin of safety ratio natin. Assuming that the break-even point in sales will remain unchanged. Hindi po magbabago yon. So, ibig sabihin, the margin of safety ratio will keep on increasing kasi mas malaki na siya. Mas malaki na yung value ng safety, margin of safety natin. Pero pag bumaba yung sales, no, hindi po yung break-even point, yung sales, there is a decrease on margin of safety ratio, assuming the BFP sales remain unchanged. Okay? There is a direct relationship of increasing the sales to the margin of safety ratio. Okay? So, hopefully, naintindihan niyo po what is margin of safety. Okay? Next, computation for number of units or peso sales if targeting an income. What if the company wanted you to compute, no, the number of units or peso sales to be achieved and then given a targeted income? So, well, we will use the break-even point formula, pero dadagdagan lang po natin yon. From the given formula of computing the break-even point, just add the targeted net income, okay, whether after tax or before tax, to the total fixed cost. All you need to do, ganito, the total fixed cost, i-add mo yung targeted income, then i-divide mo sa contribution margin per unit or ratio. Depende sa kung ano ko computein natin, kung units ba or peso sales. Ganun lang po yung kasimple. Idagdag mo lang po yung targeted income to the total fixed cost, and then i-divide po yun sa contribution margin. Kung in units, i-divide yun sa contribution margin per unit. Pero kung peso sales, i-divide yun sa contribution margin ratio. Okay? How about to compute the break-even point for multiple products with single total fixed cost? Okay. Kung break-even point in totality, no, assuming wala pang allocation, hindi pa natin yun i-allocate yung break-even point na na-compute natin. Ibig sabihin, kino-compute pa lang po natin the total number of units. Pag i-add lahat ng products, ilan po bang units from product A to Z? Kasi A to Z ang maghahati-hati sa total fixed cost. Yun yung total products mo, multiple products. Okay? Pag itotal mo yun, at what level ka masasabing break-even point? Well, same pa rin, no? That's still fixed cost over contribution margin. Pero pagkakaiba lang po ngayon, we need to determine the weighted contribution margin. Okay? Weighted. Bakit i-weight natin? Take note, kasi meron po yan tinatawag na mga ratio and proportion sa bawat produkto. Okay? Ratio and proportion. Ratio and proportion, ha? Okay. Well, anyways, I will discuss it clearly later on because I prepared an illustrative example related to this topic. Okay? Next. We are now on our illustrative exercises. Okay. Sige nga. Let's try to apply all concepts that I discussed on this exercise. A company is concerned about its operating performance as summarized below. Revenues, okay, 300,000. Yun po yung sales natin. And then, the selling price per unit is 12.5. Okay, granted. We have variable cost at totality 180,000. And then an operating loss of 40,000 pesos. We are required to compute how many additional units should have been sold in order for the company to break even. And then, how much is the break even in peso sales? Okay, take note, dalawa po yung pinapakompute sa atin. Magkano po ang idadagdag from the existing number of units na meron tayo para ma-achieve yung break-even, at magkano po ang break-even point in pesos. Okay? Sige. To answer that, ito po. Let us compute the actual number of units sold muna. Considering that the revenue is 300,000 pesos, that is the total sales, and the unit selling price is 12.5. So the actual units sold is 24,000 units. Ibig sabihin, at 24,000 units, we have an operating loss of 40,000 pesos. Okay? Kaya nga pinapakompute sa atin how much should be added to achieve break-even point. So, 24 units, dapat dagdagan po natin yon. Yung tanong, magkano yung break-even point in units? Yun yung gagawin natin muna. Okay? Yun po yung hahanapin natin. Okay. Then, determine the number of break-even point in units. So, yun, sinabi ko pa lang, no? Pero, bago yan, hanapin muna natin yung selling price per unit at variable cost per unit. Bakit? Kasi, take note, if we're going to compute the break-even point in units, we computed it in a way na total fixed cost over the contribution margin per unit. Yung binigay lang ng problem is the selling price per unit. Ngayon, sasabihin mo, Sir, magkakaroon po ako ng problema kasi the variable cost per unit is not given. Madali lang po yun. Mako-compute po natin yon. Take note, na-compute na po natin yung total actual units sold na 24,000 units. And then, we have 180,000 pesos total variable cost. Pag i-divide po natin yung 180,000 na total variable cost to the 24,000 units sold, no, actual units sold, we can now determine the variable cost per unit, which is 7.5. Okay, nandyan, no? 7.5. Can we now determine the contribution margin per unit? Yes, kasi meron na po tayong selling price per unit at variable cost per unit. That is 12.5 over 7.5 minus 7.5. The contribution margin per unit is 5.0. If we are going to convert that into ratio, the selling price at 100% and then the variable cost per unit, the variable cost ratio is 60%. Paano po na-compute yung 60%? Sir, simple. 7.5 over 12.5, that is 60%. Okay? Use your calculator there, no? 7.5 over 12.5, that is 60%. How about the contribution margin ratio? Pwede mong ibawas yung 60% sa 100, that's 40%. Pero kung di ka di ka pa naniniwala na 40%, 5.0 i-divide mo sa 12.5, that is 40%. Okay? Okay, that is contribution margin per unit over the selling price per unit. That is equal to 40%. Bakit kinumpute ko na ngayon? Kasi, di ba, isang tanong doon is the break-even point in peso sales. Later on, that 40% na na-compute ko, gagamitin ko mamaya to compute the break-even point in peso sales. Okay, next. Considering that the fixed cost is not given in the problem. Totoo, hindi nga binigay sa problem kasi yung binigay lang revenue, variable cost, and operating loss. Using the variable costing method, we can determine the fixed cost. Take note, the operating loss is 40,000. And then the contribution margin is 120. Sir, paano nyo po na-compute yung 120? That 120 is simply the total revenue of 300 minus the total variable cost of 180. The contribution margin is 120. Ngayon, problema mo, magkano kaya yung fixed cost? Alam naman po natin that fixed cost is being deducted to the contribution margin. Okay? And then the operating loss is provided. So we will squeeze that. No? 40 plus 120, that is 160. Bakit 40 plus 120, sir? Kasi operating loss yan. Hindi po natin di po pwedeng ibawas yung 40 sa 120. Okay? Instead, dapat idagdag. Okay? No, idadagdag po natin kasi loss yan. Pero kung naging operating profit yan, hindi po yan idadagdag. Ha? Ibabawas ko po yun. Okay, ibabawas. In this case, idinagdag ko yung 40 sa 120 kasi operating loss yan. Okay, take note ha. Hindi parating idadagdag. It will depend. No? In this case, idinagdag yung 40 sa 120 kasi operating loss. Pero pag operating profit yan, ibawas yan sa 120 para ma-determine yung fixed cost. So, now, we can now compute the break-even point in sales and in units because the fixed cost na-determine na rin po natin. If the fixed cost is 160 and the contribution margin per unit is 5, we can now determine the break-even point in units. Gamitin yung calculator para masigurado. 160,000 divide by 5 pesos. The break-even point in units is 32,000. That is the break-even point in units. Pero hindi po yun yung hinahanap ng problem. Yung hinahanap po ng problem is how much additional units to achieve the break-even point. Considering the actual units sold, na-compute po natin to kanina, which is 24,000. 32,000 minus 24,000, ibig sabihin, we need 8,000 units additional to achieve the break-even point. The 24,000 units na naibenta mo will achieve an operating loss. Pagdagdagan mo yan ng 8, magiging 32, we can now achieve the break-even point. Okay? In units. Sir, paano naman po kukomputin yung break-even point in peso sales? Nandito yon. To answer question number 2, to compute for the break-even point in sales. Again, gagamitin ko pa rin yung total fixed cost na 160. And then, na-compute, di ba, sinabi ko kanina, yung 40% na kinompute ko na ratio ng contribution margin, gagamitin ko yon in the computation of the break-even point in peso sales. So, 160 divided by 40%. Oh, sige, calculate. So, we will come up with 400,000 pesos. Okay? Ganon. Pero, yung iba, dahil na-compute na, yung iba, ganito nila kino-compute yung break-even point in peso sales. Pero hindi ko naman po sinasabing mali po yan, no? Pwede pong ganon. Na kunin mo yung break-even point in units, which is 32,000, then i-multiply mo yung 32,000 sa 12.5 na selling price. Lalabas rin po yung break-even point in peso sales na 400,000. Okay? So, yon. Pwede po yung ganon. Okay? Kasi, it will have the same result naman. Okay? Hindi ko po pinagbabawal na gamitin yung pangalawang computation. Sadyang pwede pong ganon yung kakompute natin on determining the break-even point in peso sales. Kasi meron po mga estudyante, kinocompute muna yung break-even point in units and then i-multiply yun to the selling price per unit para makompute yung break-even point in peso sales. Parang long cut, pinahaba yung computation. Pero hindi po yun mali, tama din po yun. Okay? So, to answer the question number 2, the break-even point in peso sales is 400,000 pesos. So, hopefully, naintindihan nyo na how to compute the break-even point in units and the break-even point in peso sales. Okay? Tingnan natin kung ano pa ang susunod. Okay, using the same problem. Ayun, using the same problem. Assume the company would like to target a net income of 120,000 before tax or after tax. Okay, how much will be the break-even point in units and break-even point in sales? Sinabi ko nga, if there is a targeted income, idadag mo lang yung targeted net income to the fixed cost. Simple, for the computation of break-even point in units, that is 160,000 plus 120,000 divided by 5. Ibig sabihin, hindi na po to break-even point kasi hindi naman to masisiro. The number of units to achieve the 120,000 before tax net income must be at 56,000 units. Ibig sabihin po nun, we need to sell 56,000 units to achieve the 120,000 pesos before tax. How about in break-even points in peso sales? 160 plus 120, i-divide mo yan by 40%. Ibig sabihin po nun, we have 700,000 pesos sales to achieve the 120,000 before tax na net income. Okay? Sige. Well, you can check kung tama ma-achieve nga yung 120. I give you the honor to check if the 120 targeted net income is being achieved at 700,000 or at 56,000 units. Okay? Sige. Next. Okay. The break-even point in multiple products. A company having a 280,000 fixed cost has the following data. Ibig sabihin, isang company merong 280,000 fixed cost and then provided you the following data. Ito, multiple products to kasi dalawang product siya. Product A and product B. Dalawang product, isang single fixed cost. We have sales. Price per unit, 5 and 6 for product A and B respectively. Then we have variable cost per unit, 3 and 5 respectively. Assume 3 units of A are sold for each unit of B. Ibig sabihin, 3 units ni A ang mabebenta and then isa kay B. So that is a 3:1 na ratio. O yun, may ratio po tayo ha. 3:1 na ratio. Gagamitin po natin yan mamaya na 3:1 na ratio. Okay. Requirements. Compute the break-even point of sales in peso and in units. How the break-even point in units and in peso be allocated to product A and B? Magkaiba po yun ha. Yung una, pinapakompute yung totality of break-even point in sales and in peso sales and in units. Yung pangalawang tanong, the break-even point in units and in peso sales, ilan ba doon yung kay product A at yung para kay product B? Okay, magkaiba po yun ha. Sige, umpisahan na po natin. To compute for the break-even point in unit sales and peso sales, the first thing that we will do is determine the weighted average contribution margin. Okay. Una po natin gagawin is the weighted average contribution margin. If the selling price and the variable cost of product in A and B is provided, we can now compute the contribution margin of each product. For product A, we have 2 pesos because that is 5 minus 3. While on product B, 6 minus 5, we have 1. To determine the weighted average contribution margin, take note, the ratio, no, is that in every 3 units of product A, there is 1 unit of product B. That is 3:1. Kaya nga, the ratio is 3:1. So, to determine the weight, that is 3/4 and 1/4. Okay? 3/4 and 1/4. Okay? 2 multiplied by 3/4, the average contribution margin for product A will be 1.5. For product B, 1/4 of 1, that is 0.25. The weighted average contribution margin will be the sum of 1.5 and 0.25. So, ibig sabihin, the weighted average contribution margin is 1.75. Okay. Considering nahanap na po natin yung weighted average contribution margin, can we now compute the break-even point in units? Units muna ha. Kasi this is a weighted average contribution margin per unit. Hindi to ratio. Unit. Okay? So, makakompute po natin using the 1.75 weighted average contribution margin per unit is a break-even point in units. Okay? So, to compute for the break-even point in units, the total fixed cost is 280. I-divide po natin yan sa weighted average contribution margin of 1.75. Lalabas the break-even point in units for the entire products. Ibig sabihin, if we add product A and B, ibig sabihin, we need 160,000 units to achieve the break-even point. Okay? So, in Tagalog, itong 160,000 units is not pertaining to product A nor product B. This 160 is for both product A and B. Okay? Ngayon, paano po natin malalaman kung sa 160 na yan, magkano ang kay product A, magkano ang kay product B? Okay. To allocate the 160 break-even point in units to product A and B, we will use the ratio na 3/4 and 1/4. Okay? 3/4 and 1/4. Okay, it's not 1/2, 1/4. Typo error. The 160,000, okay, 3/4 of 160 will be to product A. So, ibig sabihin, product A, from the 160, ang dapat niyang ma-produce is 120,000 units. For product B, ang dapat niyang ma-produce 40,000 units. That is 1/4 of 160. Okay? So, yun, na-allocate ko na, ha? Okay? Parang sinasagutan ko yung una, at the same time, sinasagutan ko yung pangalawa. Pero in units pa lang. Wala pa ako sa in pesos, ha? Okay. Paano ko naman mako-compute yung break-even point in pesos? Okay? Then, the value of break-even point in pesos for each product. O, kasi madali lang. Na-compute naman natin yung allocation ng 160 to product A and product B. Pwede ba nating i-multiply yung 120,000 units to the selling price of product A and the 40,000 units to the selling price of product B? Yes, we can multiply it para mahanap kung magkano yung peso sales for product A at break-even point, and then peso sales to product B at break-even point. Okay. Sige, ganito yon. Okay. To compute for the break-even point in sales, let us use the number of units allocated to each product and its corresponding selling price. Number of units allocated, 120 to product A, 40,000 to product B. Multiply it to the selling price. The selling price of product A is 5 pesos. Multiply it to 120 kasi yun yung allocated product. Break-even point in units to product A. Lalabas, the total sales for product A at break-even is 600,000. While for product B, that is 40,000 multiplied by 6. That is 240,000. So, yun yung allocation. Pero, kung tatanungin, what is the total break-even point in peso sales? Ibig sabihin, the entire products, lahat ng products, iyan mo lang yung sales ni product A at yung product B, lalabas po yung total break-even point peso sales na 840,000. Ganun lang po yun. Okay? That's how I compute to determine the break-even point of peso sales for the all products, and to allocate the break-even point. Okay? If you have different way on how to compute it, as long as we come up with the same answer, okay, it is acceptable. Okay? It is acceptable. As long as that computation is within the concept of break-even point analysis, ha? Okay? Anyways, wala naman pong standard on computation on CVP analysis. Okay? Take note, this is MAS. Wala naman pong standard ito. Okay? Sige. To summarize, we can say that the cost volume profit analysis is a method which provides information about relationship of costs incurred in the production of a particular product to the number of units to be produced to achieve profit or at break-even. This tool is essential in the profit planning and strategy of every business establishment. Or even not a business establishment, the CVP analysis can be used. For instance, in my experience, I um, I apply CVP analysis on determining as to how many participants should attend in a should attend. Kasi remember, we will incur to fixed costs like sound system, like the venue, and then we will incur variable costs like the food, the kits. Okay, from those items, we determine the price of registration, which is usually affordable sa mga participants. Then later on, we try um to to compute, no, the break even point. Ibig sabihin, at what level um na participants dapat ma-achieve natin at this particular selling price, na para hindi naman um maglalabas pa tayo ng personal funds related to this seminar. Okay? So CVP analysis is very important, particularly on profit planning process. Okay? That ends my discussion in CVP analysis. Hopefully, you naintindihan niyo po yung discussion ko on CVP. If meron po kayong mga katanungan, don't hesitate to ask, no? Okay? Me, well, this is Mr. Maraya discussing about CVP. If you have anything to ask, no, you can um, you can comment, no, sa sa Facebook about the topic. So for today, hanggang dun lang muna. Thank you for listening and God bless everyone. Happy weekends.